Have you ever seen a moment where someone thought they had all the power, only to realize they were standing on the wrong side of the truth? This story begins in a quiet farming community where peace and hard work define the rhythm of life. Mr. Johnson, a humble man with a strong presence, had poured his soul into his farm. His days were filled with the sound of tractors, the scent of fresh soil, and the quiet pride of building something with his own two hands. But not everyone saw it that way. Karen, a sharp-tongued HOA board member, had made it her mission to scrutinize everything he did. She didn't like the sight of tractors on the road, the animals grazing near the fence, or even the sound of farm equipment at dusk. One day, her frustration reached a boiling point. Convinced she could control him, she marched down the dusty road, phone in hand, and called 911. Her voice was sharp, her accusations heavy, as if she were saving the neighborhood from danger. What she didn't know was that her call would uncover a truth that would leave her speechless, a truth carried quietly in Mr. Johnson's back pocket all along. The wail of sirens broke the afternoon calm as patrol cars pulled up to the edge of the farm. Karen stood tall, waving her arms dramatically, pointing toward Mr. Johnson as though he were a threat to the entire neighborhood. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, unsure of what was happening. Mr. Johnson, meanwhile, remained calm, leaning against his fence with a steady gaze. The officers approached cautiously, taking Karen's frantic words as their cue. She accused him of breaking zoning laws, trespassing HOA rules, and even hinted at suspicious activities. To her, every tractor was an eyesore, every shed an act of defiance. Yet, Mr. Johnson never raised his voice. He knew exactly who he was, and what he carried. His silence made Karen even more restless, convinced that she was about to see him escorted away in handcuffs. The crowd grew as whispers spread. But while Karen thrived on the attention, Mr. Johnson prepared to turn the tables, revealing a side of himself that no one in that HOA-laden neighborhood had ever imagined. The lead officer stepped forward, hand resting near his holster, and asked Mr. Johnson for identification. With steady hands, Mr. Johnson reached into his wallet and pulled out a leather badge holder. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The shiny emblem caught the light, and the officer's eyes widened. Karen's smirk faltered. Instead of producing a driver's license, Mr. Johnson revealed his badge, an official symbol of his position as a federal agent. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the truth sank in. The man she had treated like a nuisance, the farmer she dismissed as beneath her standards, was in fact a decorated officer who had dedicated years to serving his country. The officer saluted him with quiet respect, while Karen's face drained of color. She stammered, trying to reframe her accusations, but the damage was already done. Every neighbor watching now saw her in a different light, while Mr. Johnson stood taller, not out of arrogance, but with the quiet dignity of a man who never needed to prove himself, until now. Karen's confidence crumbled in the weight of silence. She tried to laugh it off, insisting she was only concerned about community safety, but the neighbors weren't convinced. Whispers turned into pointed stares, and the once supportive crowd now questioned her motives. Mr. Johnson, however, chose not to gloat. He spoke in a calm voice, explaining his farm was not only legal but also a vital part of the area's heritage. He reminded everyone that the land they stood on was once farmland before it was ever subdivided into HOA-governed properties. The officers confirmed his permits were in order, nodding respectfully before stepping back. Karen shuffled her feet, trying to deflect attention, but her words held no weight anymore. The people realized this wasn't about rules, it was about pride and prejudice. And in that moment, it became clear that Mr. Johnson had earned not just their respect, but their admiration. The badge was proof of authority, but his composure was proof of character. The news spread like wildfire. By the next day, the story traveled across the community, whispered from porch to porch. People began stopping by Mr. Johnson's farm, not with suspicion, but with offerings of support. Some even apologized for the way they had quietly judged him before. Karen, on the other hand, avoided eye contact whenever she walked down the street. Her reputation as the rule enforcer had turned into something else, an example of how arrogance could blind judgment. Meanwhile, Mr. Johnson returned to his daily work. The fields still needed tending, animals still needed care, and the farm still pulsed with life. But now, he wasn't just seen as the man with a tractor, he was seen as a protector, someone whose quiet strength had spoken louder than Karen's phone call ever could. The same badge that once stayed hidden in his wallet had become a symbol that the neighborhood could never ignore again. Weeks passed, but the memory of that day lingered. Karen tried to regain her position of power within the HOA, proposing new rules and stricter guidelines, but every time she spoke, her words were met with skepticism. Neighbors remembered how quickly she had judged, and how wrong she had been. Meanwhile, Mr. Johnson's farm became a place of gathering. Families brought their children to see the animals, elders came to reminisce about the old days of farming, and the community slowly embraced the land they once saw as an inconvenience. Mr. Johnson never bragged about what happened, he didn't need to. His silence carried more strength than any argument Karen could make. Even the HOA meetings shifted, with members pushing back against unnecessary rules. The power Karen once wielded with her phone call had been replaced by T earned it nonetheless. The season turned, crops grew tall, and the farm stood as a living reminder of resilience. Karen, quieter than ever, eventually stepped down from her HOA position, realizing her influence had slipped away. But the real victory wasn't in her defeat, it was in the unity that followed. Mr. Johnson's story became a lesson for the entire neighborhood: never judge a person by assumptions, and never mistake silence for weakness. His farm remained more than just land, it became a symbol of patience, integrity, and the strength to rise above pettiness. For those who witnessed it, the day Karen called 911 wasn't just about a badge being revealed, it was about truth shining through falsehood, and dignity standing firm against arrogance. In the end, the community was stronger, the farm was thriving, and Mr. Johnson's quiet presence was proof that real power doesn't need to be announced, it simply reveals itself at the right time. The seasons shifted, and Mr. Johnson's farm blossomed with new life. Rows of crops stretched proudly toward the horizon, animals roamed freely, and the once quiet land now felt alive with purpose. Neighbors who once whispered doubts now stopped by with smiles, their children laughing as they fed the animals or chased butterflies across the fields. The farm was no longer seen as a problem, it had become a part of the community's heart. Karen, once the loudest voice in the HOA, had grown silent. Her authority slipped away, not because of rules or votes, but because people no longer trusted her judgment. Eventually, she stepped down, realizing that her power had dissolved the moment truth was revealed. But for Mr. Johnson, the victory was never about humiliating her. His triumph was quieter, deeper. It was in showing strength without anger, patience without arrogance, and dignity without the need to boast. His badge had shocked the neighborhood, but it was his character that left the lasting impression. The story of that day lived on as a reminder: never underestimate a person based on assumptions, and never mistake calmness for weakness. The farm stood tall, the community stronger, and Mr. Johnson remained the quiet guardian of both his land and his integrity, proof that true respect is not demanded, it is earned. Months passed, and the story of Mr. Johnson's farm had spread far beyond the neighborhood. Local newspapers picked it up, calling it a tale of dignity and resilience. Community leaders visited, praising his contribution to preserving the land and culture of the area. Even schools began arranging small trips to the farm, turning it into a place where children could learn about nature, hard work, and respect. For the neighbors, the farm had become a symbol of unity, a place that brought people together instead of dividing them. Karen, though quieter now, still lived nearby. Every time she walked past the fields, she was reminded of the day her pride was shattered, not by anger or confrontation, but by truth itself. While she faded into the background, Mr. Johnson's influence only grew. He never raised his voice, never demanded an apology, yet his very presence became a lesson everyone carried: that authority doesn't come from control, but from character. The farm thrived, the community flourished, and in every corner of the town, the story was retold with admiration. What began as an HOA conflict had transformed into something greater: a legacy of patience, honor, and the quiet power of doing what's right. As time moved forward, the farm became more than just a story, it became a destination. On weekends, families gathered at Mr. Johnson's land for community events, farmers markets, harvest festivals, and small workshops where children learned how to plant seeds and watch them grow. The sound of laughter filled the air where tension once lingered. Local businesses partnered with him, turning the farm into a thriving part of the town's economy. Yet through it all, Mr. Johnson remained humble. He worked the fields with the same steady hands, rose with the same sunrise, and greeted every visitor with quiet respect. For the neighbors, it was almost impossible to imagine that not long ago, Karen had tried to paint this place as a problem. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Her attempt to bring him down had only raised him higher, proving that truth always finds its way to the surface. And as the farm's reputation grew, so did the respect for the men behind it. Mr. Johnson had become more than a farmer or even a badge holder. He was now the foundation of something lasting, something that no HOA rule could ever control: trust, unity, and community pride. Seasons turned once more, and the farm now stood as a living landmark in the town. What began as a simple piece of land had grown into a place where memories were made. Children who once feared Karen's sharp lectures now ran freely through sunflower rows, neighbors who barely greeted each other now shared meals at long wooden tables during harvest nights, and laughter echoed where arguments once ruled. Mr. Johnson never sought credit, but his presence became the quiet thread weaving the community together. Karen, still living nearby, often watched from a distance. Though she rarely spoke of it, she couldn't escape the reminder of how her single call to 911 had reshaped everything, not in her favor, but in his. Some said she softened with time, her edges worn down by the undeniable warmth that grew around the farm. Mr. Johnson never held a grudge. Instead, he let kindness do what anger never could: heal. And so, the neighborhood changed. The farm became more than crops, more than animals. It became a sanctuary of respect, a lesson written into the soil itself. And everyone who visited walked away carrying the same truth: strength doesn't come from control, it comes from patience, humility, and the courage to stand firm without losing grace.